Once long ago, in the great city of Ayodhya there lived a king. Ayodhya was a prosperous city, one where its citizens were happy, pure of heart and well-educated in the teachings of both man and God. Its king was also a good man and happy in almost every respect, for he had many wise counselors and sages in his family, and he had been blessed with a lovely daughter Santa. This king was called Dasharatha, and he married his sweet daughter to the great sage Rishyasringa, who became a member of his inner circle, advising him on all matters with great wisdom and foresight. Two fine priests, Vashishta and Vamadeva, were also part of his family, and they were known to all as the most saintly of men. But Dasharatha had one hole in his glittering life. He longed for a son to carry on his line, a son who would one day be king. For many years, he made offerings to the great powers, but to no avail, until such time as he made the most supreme sacrifice, that of a horse. His 3 wives were overjoyed by the prospect of having a son, and when after 1 year, the horse returned from the sacrifice, Rishyasringa and Vashishta prepared the ceremony. With the greatest of respect and joy, Rishyasringa was able to announce to Dasharatha that he would father 4 sons, and they would carry his name into the future. When any sacrifice is made by man, all of the deities come together to take their portion of what has been offered. And so it was on this occasion that they had assembled to take from the sacrificial horse. There was, however, a dissenter among their ranks, one who was greedy and oppressive, and who caused in his colleagues such dissension that they came forward to Brahma with a request that he be destroyed. The evil spirit was called Ravana, and at an early age he had been granted immunity from death by spirits or gods. His immunity had led him to become selfish and arrogant, and he took great pleasure in flaunting his exemption from the normal fates. Brahma spoke wisely to the gathered deities. "Ravana is indeed evil," he said quietly, and he had great foresight in requesting immunity from death by his equals. But he was not wise enough to seek immunity from death by humans, and it is in this way that he must be slain. The deities were relieved to find that Ravana was not invincible, and as they celebrated amongst themselves, they were quietened by a profound presence who entered their midst. It was the great god Vishnu himself, and he appeared in flowing yellow robes, his eyes sparkling. He carried with him mace and discus and conch, and he appeared on the back of Garuda, the divine bird attendant of Narayana. The deities fell at his feet, and they begged him to be born as Dasharatha's 4 sons in order to destroy the deceitful Ravana. And so it was that Vishnu threw himself into Dasharatha's fire, and taking the form of a sacred tiger, spoke to the anxious father-to-be, pronouncing himself the ambassador of God himself. He presented Dasharatha with spiritual food, which he was to share with his wives, 2 portions to Sumitra, 1 to Kaikeyi, and 1 to Kaushalya. And soon, 4 strong healthy babies were born to Dasharatha's wives, and they were named by Vashishta, the divine priest. They were Rama, born to Kaushalya, Bharata, born to Kaikeyi, and Lakshman and Satruna, born to Sumitra. Dasharatha's 4 sons grew into robust and healthy young men. They were brave and above all good, and they were revered for their looks and good sense. The greatness of Vishnu was spread amongst them, and each glowed with great worth. The young men traveled in pairs, Satruna devoting himself to his brother Bharata, and Lakshman dedicating himself to Rama. Rama was very much the favorite son, favorite of both Dasharatha and the people. He was a noble youth, well versed in arts, sciences and physical applications alike. His spirituality was evident in all he did. By the age of 16, Rama was more accomplished than any man on earth, inspiring greatness in all who came into contact with him. There lived at this time a sage by the name of Vishvamitra, who had become a Brahma Rishi, an excellent status which had been accorded to him by the gods themselves. He lived in Siddhashrama, but his life there was far from easy. He was a religious man, and took enormous strength from his daily prayers and sacrifices. Each day his sacrificial fires and prayers were interrupted by 2 wily and evil spirits, Maricha and Suvahu, who received their orders from Ravana himself. Knowing that Rama was the incarnation of Vishnu, Vishvamitra approached Dasharatha and begged him to send Rama to rid him of these evil spirits. Now Dasharatha was against the idea of sending his favorite son to what would surely be a dangerous and perhaps fatal mission, But he knew as well that a great Brahma rishi must be respected. And so it was that Rama and Lakshman traveled to Vishvamitra for 10 days in order to stand by the sacrificial fire. The young men were dressed in the finest of clothes, glittering with jewels and fine cloths. They were adorned with carefully wrought arms, and they glowed with pride and valor. All who witnessed their passing was touched by the glory, and a ray of light entered each of their lives. They arrived at Siddhashrama in a cloud of radiance, and as the sacrifice began, Rama wounded Maricha and Suvahu until they fled in dismay. The other evil spirits were banished, and the little hermitage was once again in peace, cleansed of the evil of Ravana. Rama was greeted with great acclaim after he rid Vishvamitra's hermitage of the evil spirits, and his taste of heroism whetted in him a great appetite for further adventure. He begged Vishvamitra to present him with further tasks, and he was rewarded by the hallowed priest's plans to visit Janaka, the Raja of Mithila. Janaka was owner of a splendid bow, one which no man was able to string. He had come by this bow through his ancestor Devarata, who had received it personally from the gods, who had themselves been presented the bow by Shiva. The bow was now worshipped by all who had seen it, for gods, spirits, and even the finest warriors had been unable to bend its mighty back. Janaka was planning a marvelous sacrifice, and it was for Mithila that the 3 men would depart, in order to take part in the festivities, and to see the great bow in person. As they traveled along the Ganges, they were followed by all the birds and animals who inhabited Siddhashrama, and by the monkey protectors who had been presented to the 2 brothers upon their birth. They arrived in Mithila in a burst of splendid color and radiance, and Janaka knew at once that the company he was about to keep was godly in every way. He bowed deeply to the men, and set them carefully among the other men of nobility. The following day, Janaka brought the men to the bow, and explained to them its great significance. He said to Rama, "I have a daughter Sita, who is not the product of man or of animal, but who burst from a furrow of the earth itself as I plowed and hallowed my field. She is a woman of supreme beauty and godliness, and she will be presented to any man or god who can bend the bow." Rama and his brother bent their heads respectfully, and Rama nodded towards the bow. A chariot pulled by 4,000 men moved the bow forward, and he quietly reached towards it. The case sprung open at his touch, and as he strung it, it snapped into 2 pieces with a bolt of fire. There was a crack so loud that all the men in the room, Rama, Vishvamitra, Janaka, and Lakshman, fell to the ground, clutching their ears and writhing. And there was silence, a quiet brought on by fear and reverence. The spectators struggled to their knees and bowed to the great Rama, and a jubilant Janaka shouted his blessing and ordered the wedding preparations to begin. Messengers were sent at once to the household of Dasharatha, and upon his arrival, the festivities began. Sita was presented to Rama, and Urmila, the second daughter of Janaka, was promised to Lakshman. Mandavya and Srutakirti, who were daughters of Kushadwaja, were presented to Bharata and Satruna. All around the world erupted in a fusion of light and color. Fragrant blossoms were cast down from the heavens upon the radiant brothers and their brides, and a symphony of angelic music wove its way around them. There was happiness like none ever known, and the 4 young men cast down their heads with deep gratitude. They returned home, in a shower of glory, to Ayodhya, where they would serve their proud and honored father Dasharatha. After many years of happiness at Ayodhya, Dasharatha decided that the time had come to appoint an heir apparent. Rama was still the most favored of the brothers, a fine man of sterling integrity and wisdom. He was known across the land for his unbending sense of justice, and he was friend to any man who was good. His brothers had no envy for their honorable brother, for he was so kind and serene that he invited their good intentions, and they wished him nothing but good fortune. Rama was the obvious choice for heir, and Dasharatha took steps to prepare for his ascendant. He drew together all of his counselors and kings, and he advised them of his plans. He explained how his years had been kind and bounteous, but that they weighed down on him now, and he felt the need to rest. He proposed that his son Rama become heir apparent. The uproar astonished the elderly king. There was happiness and celebration at his proposal, and at once the air grew clear, and the sky shone with celestial light. Bemused, he turned to the esteemed parliament of men, and he said, Why do you wish him to be your ruler? By reason of his many virtues, for indeed he towers among men as Sakra among the gods. He speaks the truth, and he is a mighty and even bowman. He is ever busied with the welfare of the people, and not given to detraction where he finds one blemish among many virtues. He is skilled in music, and his eyes are fair to look upon. Neither his pleasure nor his anger is in vain. He is easily approached, and self-controlled, and goes not forth to war, or the protection of a city or province without victorious return. He is beloved of all. Indeed, the earth desires him for her lord. And once again the cheers rose and the preparations began. The finest victuals were ordered, honey and butter, rices and milk and curds. There were golds, silvers and gems of great gleaming weight, and elephants and bulls and tigers ordered. Fine cloths and skins were draped around the palace, and everyone hummed with incessant, bustling excitement. And above it all was Rama, serene and calm, as cool as the winter waters of the Ganges, as pure of heart as the autumn moon. And just before the time when he would stand forward in his father's shoes, he was brought before the great Dasharatha, who greeted his kneeling form with warmth and lifted him up upon the seat of king. He said to him then, Though you are virtuous by nature, I would advise you out of love and for your good, practice yet greater gentleness and restraint of sense. Avoid all lust and anger, maintain your arsenal and treasury, personally and by means of others make yourself well acquainted with the affairs of state. Administer justice freely to all, that the people may rejoice. Gird yourself, my son, and undertake your task. Rama, for all his wisdom, found great solace in his father's words, and as the town around him buzzed with the activity of thousands of men preparing for the holy fast, he sat calmly, in worship and in gratitude. Now throughout this time, all of Dasharatha's household celebrated the choice of Rama for heir apparent. His mother Kaushalya and his wife Sita were honored, and his aunts too reveled in their relation to this fine young man. There was no room for envy in their hearts, until, that is, the deceitful old nurse Manthara took it upon herself to stir up the seeds of discontent. And this she did by the subtle but constant pressures she applied to her mistress Kaikeyi, the mother of Bharata. Kaikeyi was by nature a fair woman, easy-natured and gentle. It took many months of persuasion before a hole was pierced in her goodness, and the beginnings of evil allowed to enter. It was a misfortune for Rama to become king, said Manthara, for Bharata would be cast out, and Kaikeyi would be the subordinate of Kaushalya. Kaikeyi dismissed such nonsense and carried on with her daily work. Several days later, Manthara was back. Bharata would be sent away, she said. Did that not worry his mother? But Kaikeyi was calm. She said, Why grieve at Rama's fortune? He is well fitted to be king, and if the kingdom be his, it will also be Bharata's, for Rama ever regards his brothers as himself. Manthara did not give up. She twisted her sword a little deeper and was rewarded by hitting at Kaikeyi's pride. Don't you know, Kaikeyi, she said, that Rama's mother will seek revenge upon you. Yours will be a sorry lot when Rama rules the earth. Kaikeyi's rage burst from within her, and she stalked around her chamber. Why, he will have to be deported at once, she said furiously. But how can I do it? How can I install Bharata as heir? The treacherous Manthara was again at her side, needling the pain and fury that she had inspired in her gentle mistress. You have 2 unused gifts from Dasharatha, she reminded her. Have you forgotten that fateful day when you found him near dead on the battlefield? What did he promise you then, my mistress? She asked her. Why, he has made you his favorite of wives, and he has done everything in his power to keep you happy. This is what you must do. And the evil witch leaned forward and whispered in Kaikeyi's ear. Her eyes widened, and their glitter dimmed. She bowed her head, and she left the room. Kaikeyi cast off her jewels and fine clothes, and pulled down her hair. She dressed herself in sacks, and she laid down on the floor of the anger chamber, where she cried with such vigor that Dasharatha could not fail to hear her sobs. Finding her there, stripped of her finery, he laid beside her and spoke gently to his favorite wife. What has happened? What is it? He whispered. If you are ill, there are many doctors who can cure what ails you. If someone has wronged you, we can right that wrong. Indeed, whatever you want, my dear Kaikeyi, I will ensure you have. Your desire is mine. You know that I can refuse you nothing." Kaikeyi sat up and brushed away her tears. "You know," she said, "that you promised me that day long ago, when I carried you from the battlefield and administered your wounds, when I saved you from the jaws of death. You know, dear husband, that you promised me 2 gifts, 2 boons. You told me then that I could have my desire, and until this day, I have asked you for nothing." Dasharatha roared with approval. "Of course, dear wife," he said. "Whatever you wish, it shall be yours. This I swear on Rama himself." "I wish," she said softly, "I wish, as heaven and earth and day and night are my witness, I wish that Bharata become heir, and that Rama is cast out, clad only in deerskins, to lead the life of a hermit in the forests of Dandaka, and that he remain there for 14 years. Kaikeyi knew that in 14 years her own son, who was good and true, could bind himself to the affections of the people, and that Rama, upon his return, could not shift him from a well-regarded throne. Her plan was about to unfold, and she shivered with anticipation. As expected, her husband let out a mighty roar and sank down to his knees once again. He begged Kaikeyi to change her mind, and he pleaded with her to allow his son to stay with him, but she refused to relent. And so it was that Rama was summoned to the weeping Dasharatha, and as he traveled, the crowds rose to greet him, feeling their lives changed in some small way by the benefit of his smile, his wave, his celestial presence, and bolstered by the adoration, and glowing with the supreme eloquence of his righteousness, he entered his father's chamber with unwitting happiness and calm. His father's distress wiped the smile from his lips, and the clouds filled the autumn sky. "What is it, father?" he asked, sensing deep grief and misfortune. But his father could only mutter, "Rama, Rama, I have wronged you." Rama turned to Kaikeyi. "Mother, mother," he asked, "what ill has overcome my father?" And Kaikeyi uttered with pride and something approaching glee, "Nothing, Rama, but your imminent downfall. He cannot frame the words that will cause you distress and unhappiness, but you must do as he asks. You must help him to fulfill his promise to me. You see, Rama, long ago he promised me 2 gifts. If you swear to me, now that you will do as he wishes, I will tell you all." Rama spluttered with indignation. "Of course, dear mother, anything for my father. I would walk in fire. I would drink poison or blood for him. Tell me now, so that I may more quickly set about easing his poor soul." Kaikeyi related to him the story of her gifts from Dasharatha, and told him of her father's decision that he should be sent away to dwell as a hermit in Dandaka forest for 14 years. Bharata, she said, would be installed as heir at once. Rama smiled warmly, and with such sincerity that Kaikeyi was stung with shame. "Of course," he said serenely, "I'm only sad for my father, who is suffering so. Send at once for Bharata while I go to the forest. Allow me some time to comfort my mother and Sita, and I shall do as you wish." He saluted Kaikeyi, and he left at once. His mother was grieved by her son's fate, but she lifted her head high, and she swore to him that she would follow him. "My darling," she said, "I shall follow you to the forest even as a cow follows her young. I cannot bear to wait here for your return, and I will come with you." Lakshman was greatly angered by the decision, and he vowed to fight for his brother who had been so wronged. But Rama calmed them both, and he spoke wisely and confidently. "Gentle brother, I must obey the order of my father. I will never suffer degradation if I honor the words of my father." Rama paused and turned to Kaushalya. "Mother," he said, "Kaikeyi has ensnared the king, but if you leave him while I am gone, he will surely die. You must remain and serve him. Spend your time in prayer, honoring the gods and the Brahmins, and your virtue will be preserved." Sita greeted his news with dignity. "I too will go forth into the forest with my husband," she said. "A wife shares in her husband's fate, and I shall go before you, treading upon thorns and prickly grass, and I shall be happy there as in my own father's house, thinking only of your service." And Rama granted Sita her desire, and he said to her, "Oh, my fair wife, since you do not fear the forest, you shall follow me and share my righteousness. Make haste, for we go at once." Lakshman could not bear to remain in his father's home without Rama, and he too decided to leave with Rama and Sita for the forest. shunning the wealth and entrapments of his lifestyle to take a part of Rama's righteousness. There was hysteria in the household as the three prepared to leave, and a noble Brahmin named Sumantra threw himself on the mercy of Kaikeyi to give in, begging her to allow Rama to remain. But Kaikeyi's will had turned her heart to stone, and she refused all requests for clemency. Dasharatha sat dully, numbed by grief and shame at his wife's ill will. He motioned to send all his own wealth, and that of his city, with Rama into the forest. But Kaikeyi stood firm, and insisted that Dasharatha stick to his vows and send Rama into the forest as a beggar. As their new clothes of bark were set out for them, Sita collapsed and wept, fearing for her future and loath to give up the easiness of her life, to which she had been both born and bred. The loyal subjects of Dasharatha begged him to allow Rama's wife to take the throne in his stead. There was no one, they said, who did not love Rama, and they would honor his wife as deeply as they honored him. Yet again, Kaikeyi resisted all suggestions. But then Dasharatha stood tall, and he spoke firmly. Without her jewels, and her robes, he commanded. So Sita's worldly goods were returned to her, and she shone like the sun in a summer sky, blanked by the bark-clad brothers whose goodness caused them to shine with even greater glory than Sita in her finery. They climbed up onto their chariot and set off for the forest, the citizens of Ayodhya falling in front of the carriage with despair. And then Dasharatha turned to his wife Kaikeyi, and with all of his kingly disdain he cursed her, and cast her from his bed and his home. "Take me to Kaushalya," he said majestically. "Take me swiftly, for it is only there that I will find peace." At the same time, Lakshman, Sita and Rama had made their way from the city and had reached the shores of the blessed Ganges, a river as clear as the breath of the god, and inhabited by gods and angels alike. They were greeted there by Guha, the king of Nishada, who fed their horses and made them comfortable for the night. Rama and his brother requested a paste of grain and water, and they formed their hair into the customary locks of the forest hermit. The following night they slept by a great tree on the far bank of the Ganges, and the two brothers spoke quietly to one another, pledging to protect and care for the other, and for Sita. Rama expressed his great grief at leaving his father, and his concern for Ayodhya. He begged Lakshman to return in order to care for Kaushalya, but Lakshman gently rebuked him. "O Rama," he said softly, "I can no more live without you than a fish can taken out of water. Without you I do not wish to see my father, nor Sumitra, nor heaven itself." The two men slept silently, comforted by their love and devotion for one another. There was only one way to get through the years ahead, and that was as a united twosome. The following day they reached the hermitage of Bharadwaja, where the great Rishi told them of a wonderful place on the mountain of Chitrakuta, a place which teemed with trees and peacocks and elephants, where there were rivers and caves and springs and many fruits and roots on which to feed. It was a place befitting their stature, he said, and they would be safe there. And so the following morning they set off, crossing the Jamna by raft and arriving at Shama. There they prayed and set about building a house of wood, next to the hermitage of Valmiki. A deer was slain by Lakshman, and a ritual sacrifice was offered to the divinities, and then they settled in together and allowed the happiness of their new life to enter their souls, banishing their grief for what they had left behind. Dasharatha was a broken man, and it was not long before his grief stripped him of his life. He died in the arms of Kaushalya, bewildered by his fate and recalling an incident which had occurred once in the forest, when as a youth he had accidentally slain a hermit with an errant arrow. Dasharatha had been spared punishment by a kind rishi, but he had been warned then that he would one day meet his death grieving for his son. That memory now clung to his mind, suffocating it until he gave in to his untimely death. Ayodhya was in mourning for the loss of their finest son Rama, and the death of their king was a blow they could scarcely fathom. There was no rain, and the earth dried up. An arid curse lay over the land, and the dead Dasharatha's people could not even find the energy to go about their daily toil without the wisdom and leadership of the great and wise king. An envoy was half-heartedly sent for Bharata, with a message that he must return at once, but the people cared little about his arrival, and he was not told about the fate of his father and his brother Rama. On the seventh day Bharata, son of Kaikeyi, arrived at Ayodhya at sunrise, the first rays of morning failing to light the dark silence that the city had become. He entered his father's palace, and finding no one awake, entered the bedchamber, which he too found empty. And then Kaikeyi appeared, glowing with vanity and pride at her new position. "Your father is gone," she said crisply, caring little about the man who had once been her great love. Her son had taken her place in her affections, and she lusted now for the power that he was in the position to accord her. Bharata wept silently for his father, and then, lifting a weary head, asked quietly, "Where is Rama? I am happy for him. Was he present to perform the deathbed rite? Where is he, mother? I am his servant. I take refuge at his feet. Please inform him that I am here. I wish to know my father's last words. Blessed are they that see Rama and the strong-armed Lakshman returning here with Sita," said Kaikeyi. That is what he said. Bharata looked at her for a moment and paused. "Where, may I ask, are Lakshman, Rama, and Sita?" he asked then, his face losing color. "Rama has taken Sita and Lakshman, and they have been exiled to Dandaka forest," she said nobly, and then spilling over with the excitement of her conquest, she poured out the whole story to her son, explaining the wishes granted her by Dasharatha and the wonderful honors which would now be his. "You are a murderer," cried Bharata and leapt to his feet, casting his mother to one side. "I loved Rama. I loved my father. It is for their sake alone that I call you mother, that I do not renounce you now. I do not want the kingdom. I want Rama, and I intend to bring him back from the forest, at once, taking only the days necessary to prepare the funeral rites, and to mourn his dead father Bharata, prepared to set out to find his brother. His tears were shared for his father and for his dear brother, and he resolved to find him as soon as he could. He refused the throne which was offered to him by the ministers, and preparing his chariots, he rode quickly towards the forest, following in the footsteps of Rama and the others. He reached him quickly, and was shocked and dismayed to find that Rama had adorned himself in the dress of a hermit. Shaggy locks framed his pale face, and he wore the skin of a black deer upon his shoulders. But that pale face was serene, and he gently wiped away his brother's tears. "Bharata," he said, "I cannot return. I have been commanded by both my father and my mother to live in the forest for 14 years. That I must do. You must rule, as our father would have wished." Bharata thought for a moment. "If it was our father's will for me to have the kingdom in your place, then I have the right to bestow it upon you." Rama smiled kindly then, and shook his head. "The kingdom is yours, Bharata. Rule it wisely. For these 14 years, I shall live here as a hermit." Bharata took his brother's sandals, and it was agreed that in 14 years he would be joined by Rama, and that the sandals would be restored to him then with the government and kingship of Ayodhya herself. And Rama, Sita, and Lakshman waved their farewells to Bharata and his men, and then they turned to leave themselves, no longer content in a house that had been trampled by feet of the outside world. They drew themselves deeper into Dandaka, where the cool darkness of the forest beckoned. For 10 years, Rama, Sita, and Lakshman wandered through the forests of Dandaka, resting and living for spells with hermits and other men of wisdom along their path. They befriended a vulture, Jatayu, who claimed to have been a friend of Dasharatha, and he pledged to guard Sita and to offer Rama and Lakshman his help. They settled finally at Panchavati, by the river Godavari, where lush blossoms hung over the rippling waters and the air was filled with the verdant scent of greenery. Sita, Rama, and Lakshman lived happily there, in the green, fecund woodland, and lived virtually as gods, and undisturbed, until one day they were set upon by an evil Rakshasi, sister of Ravana, called Surpanaka. There ensued a terrible battle when this ugly sister sought to seduce Rama, and Lakshman chased her away, cutting off her ears and nose in the process. Surpanaka fled deep into the forest, angered and bleeding, and she stumbled upon her brother Kara, who flew into such a rage at his sister's plight that he set out for Rama's clearing, taking 14,000 Rakshasas with him, each of which was great, courageous, and more horrible in appearance than any Rakshasa before him. Rama had been warned of their coming by Jatayu, and was prepared, sending Lakshman and Sita to a secret cave and fighting the Rakshasas alone, slaying each of the 14,000 evil spirits until at last he stood face to face with Kara. Their battle was fierce and bloody, but Rama stood his ground. At last Kara was consumed by a fiery arrow, and there was silence. Now far from this scene, Ravana was brought news of his sister's maiming and his brother's death. He was filled with such a rage that he plotted to destroy Rama by secreting away Sita. Ravana sought the advice of his most horrible accomplice Maricha, who counseled him. Ravana was insistent that he could slay Rama single-handedly, and he ignored Maricha's advice to avoid meddling with Rama, who could, if angered, quite easily destroy Ravana's city of Lanka. Ravana's plan was put into action, and the unwilling Maricha took on the form of a golden deer, with horn-like jewels and ears like two rich blue lotus flowers. He entered the forest clearing, where he flitted between the trees, golden hide glinting. As expected, Sita looked up and cried out with delight. She called to Rama and to Lakshman, and she begged them to catch the deer for her pleasure. Rama, too, suspecting nothing, was enchanted by the deer's beauty, and set out to catch her. He began to give chase. Lakshman stayed behind, suspicious about the extraordinary beauty of the deer, where he kept watch over Sita. There was silence until, from the darkness of the woods, came the cry, "Sita, Lakshman." The words were spoken in Rama's own voice, but they came from the body of the golden deer who had been hit by Rama's arrow. As the deer died, he took on the shape of Maricha once again, and in a last attempt to lure Lakshman from the forest clearing, he called out as Rama himself, and then he was dead. Rama moved swiftly, realizing the ruse, but the cry had worked its magic. Lakshman was sent out into the forest by Sita, who feared for Rama's safety, and as that brave one made his way back to Panchavati, and Sita was left alone. Alone in the clearing of Panchavati, Sita paced restlessly, concerned for her husband and his brother, growing ever greater as the moments passed. And then she was startled by a movement in the trees. Into the clearing came a wandering yogi, and Sita smiled her welcome. She would not be alone after all. She offered the yogi food and water, and told him her identity. She kindly asked for information in return, and was startled when he called himself Ravana, and asked her to renounce Rama and become his wife. Ravana gazed at the lovely Sita, and a deep jealousy and anger filled his soul. He determined to have her, and he cared little now for his revenge of Rama. Now Sita was enraged by the slight afforded her husband, the great Rama, by this insolent Ravana, and she lashed out at him. "I am the servant of Rama alone, lion among men, immovable as any mountain, as vast as the great ocean, radiant as Indra. Would you draw the teeth from a lion's mouth, or swim in the sea with a heavy stone about your neck? You are as likely to seek the sun or moon as you are me, for Rama is little like you. He is as different as is the lion from the jackal, the elephant from the cat, the ocean from the tiny stream, and gold from silver." She stopped, fear causing her to tremble. Ravana roared into the empty clearing, and taking his own shape once again, grabbed the lovely Sita by the hair and made to rise into the air with her. His cry woke the great vulture Jatayu, who had been sleeping in a nearby tree. He rose in outrage and warned the evil spirit of the wrath of Rama, who would certainly let no spirit live who had harmed his most prized possession. But Ravana sprang upon the poor great bird, and after a heroic battle, cut away his wings, so that he fell down near death. Ravana swept Sita into his carriage and rose into the sky. As she left the clearing, Sita cried out to the flowers and the forest, begging them to pass on her fate to Rama and Lakshman upon their return. And then she cast down her veil and her jewels as a token for her husband. Ravana returned her to his palace and begged her to become his wife. Her face crumpled in bitter pain, and she refused to speak. And as he persisted, she turned to him then and prophesied his certain death at the hands of Rama. And she spoke no more. Rama returned from the chase of the golden deer with an overwhelming sense of trepidation, and as he met with his brother, far from the clearing, his fears were confirmed. Rama and Lakshman raced towards the hermitage, but Sita had gone. There they found the weapons which had cut down the brave Jatayu, and the dying bird, who raised himself just enough to recount the events of the previous hours. And then, released of his burden, the soul of the great Jatayu rose above the clearing, leaving his body to sag to the ground below. And so it was that Rama set out with Lakshman to search for Sita, traveling across the country, but hearing little news and having no idea where Ravana kept his palace. He met with Sugriva, a king who had been robbed of his wife and his kingdom by his cruel brother Vali, and with the help of Hanuman, chief of the monkeys, they continued their search. Sugriva and Rama formed an alliance, and it was agreed that Sugriva would be restored to his throne with the help of Rama. In return, Sugriva would put at his disposal the monkey host to find the poor Sita, already 4 months lost. Rama's signet ring was put in Hanuman's possession to show to Sita as a sign when he found her, but the monkey chief returned with his host, ashamed and saddened that they had been unable to find the beautiful princess. But then, as hope began to fade, there was news. On the coasts of the sea, where the monkeys sat deep in dejection, was a cave in which an old and very wise vulture made his home. He was Sampati, and he was brother to Jatayu. When he heard of his brother's fate, he offered to the host his gift of foresight. Ravana, he announced, was with Sita in Lanka. Hanuman was chosen for the task of retrieving Sita, and he swelled with pride at the prospect of his task. He sprang easily across the thousands of leagues and across the sea, carelessly knocking down any foe who stood in his path. And so it was that he arrived on the walls of Lanka and made his way towards the palace. The moon sat high in the sky, and the occupants of the Golden City went about their nightly activities. Making himself invisible, he entered the private apartments of Ravana, who lay sleeping with his many wives around him. But there was no sign of Sita. Hanuman roamed the city, increasingly anxious for the safety of Rama's wife, but she was not to be found. A deep desolation overtook him, and he realized the enormity of his task. If he was unable to find the beautiful Sita, then Lakshman and Rama would surely die of grief, and Bharata and Satruna would die too. And the shame that would be brought on Sugriva and the monkey host, it was too great to contemplate. Hanuman gritted his teeth, and in monkey fashion swung over the palace walls and into the wood. The wood was cool and shining with gold and gems. In its midst was a marble palace, guarded by the ugliest of Rakshasas. In the palace lay the form of a woman, scantily clad in rags and thinner than any living woman. Hanuman watched as Ravana raised himself and approached the woman, who must surely be Sita. And he watched as the woman scorned him and ignored his advances. The glitter in her eye betrayed her identity, and Hanuman leapt up and down with glee. As Ravana left, the movement of the monkey caught Sita's eye, and she looked at him with distrust. Probably Ravana in disguise, she thought tiredly, used to his tricks. But Hanuman whispered to her and spoke reams of prayers for Rama, extolling his virtues. Sita was bemused and intrigued. She leant forward to hear more. Hanuman leapt down and spoke to Sita of Rama, presenting her with his ring as a token of his continual concern for his dear wife. Sita knew then that Hanuman was friend, not foe, and she poured out stories of Rama, begging Hanuman to return at once to Rama in order that she could be rescued. Hanuman took with him a jewel from her hair and departed. His high spirits caused him to frolic on the way, and he could not resist destroying a few of the trees around the palace. His activities drew attention, and he fought at the Rakshasas who leapt up to meet him. He wounded or slayed all who approached him until at last he was caught by the enraged Ravana, who promised him instant death. What could be worse for a monkey, he pronounced, than having his tail set fire? And so it was ordered that Hanuman's tail should be set alight, in order that he should burn to certain death. Now Sita still had powers of her own, and she prayed then, in Rama's name, that the fire should not burn Hanuman, but rage on at the end of his tail, leaving him unscathed. And so it was that Hanuman was able to leap away across Lanka, touching his tail here and there, in order to burn most of that glittering city to the ground. And then, dousing his tail in the wide, curving ocean, he flew across the sea to Rama. Rama greeted Hanuman, which caused the monkey to squirm with delight. He recounted all that had happened in the forest of Lanka, and he told what he had done with his burning tail. The monkey host leapt and cheered for Hanuman, for he had brought them great glory with his bravery and his craftiness. Sugriva issued orders that all the monkey host should march to the south, in order to lay siege to Lanka. They reached the shores of the sea at Mahendra, and there they made camp. Rama joined them, and the plan to release Sita was formed. The Vishnu was brother to Ravana, and on the day that Rama set his camp on the shores of the sea, he was pacing around the palace at Lanka. He spoke angrily to his brother, pointing out that if a monkey could lay waste to half the city, what chance did they have against Rama and his monkey host? There could be nothing but death for all. "From the day that Sita came," said Vibhishana, "there have been evil omens. The fire is ever obscured by smoke. Serpents are found in kitchens. The milk of kine runs dry. Wild beasts howl about the palace. Do restore Sita, lest we all suffer for your sin." But Ravana dismissed his brother and said that Sita would be his. Vibhishana begged his brother to see reason, but Ravana had become blind in his obsession with Sita, and he would not allow anything to stand in his path. Vibhishana rose then, and heading over the sea with his 4 advisors, he said to Ravana, "The Fae refuse advice, as a man on the brink of death refuses medicine." And so it was that Vibhishana flew across the sea to Rama's camp and announced himself as an ally to the great Rama. A deal was struck. The ocean was a formidable obstacle to the rescue of Sita, and Rama laid himself flat on the ground, begging the turbulent waters to open for him, in order that they could cross. After many days, if Rama had received no response, he would dry up the sea and lay Varuna's home bare. Mighty storms erupted, and across the world people trembled with fear. At last the ocean himself rose up and spoke to Rama, his head a mass of jewels pinning the great rivers Ganges and Sindhu to its peak. He spoke gently, his power simmering beneath a gentle exterior. "Great Rama," he said, "you know that every element has its own qualities. Mine is this, to be fathomless and hard to cross. Neither for love nor fear can I stay the waters from their endless movement. But you can pass over me by way of a bridge, and I will suffer it and hold it firm." And so Rama was calmed, and plans were made to build a bridge. With the permission of the ocean, Rama dried up the waters of the north, causing the sea there to become a desert. Then he sent a shaft which caused that dry earth to bloom with woods and vines and flowers. The ocean presented to Rama and his men a fine monkey named Nala, Vishvakarma's son. And the monkey set in force a plan to build a bridge like none other. The host of monkeys began to follow his orders, and bit by bit, timber and rocks were thrust onto the sea until a mighty bridge was formed across its girth. And the monkey host and Rama passed over, in order that the siege of Lanka would begin. The siege of Lanka was a story which took many years to resolve, and it involved the near deaths of Rama and each of his men. Garuda himself came down to heal their wounds, and the men fought on until finally Ravana was slain by Rama, with the Brahma weapon given to him by Agastya. Only this weapon had the force to take the life of the evil spirit, and the wind lay on the wings of this weapon, the sun and fire in its head, and in its mass the weight of Meru and Mandara. Rama held a mighty bow, and the arrow was sent forth, where it met its mark on the breast of Ravana. The lord of the Rakshasas was slain, and all of the gods poured bouquets of blossoms, rainbows of happiness upon Rama and his men. Rama's greatest achievement, the reason for Vishnu ever having taken human form, had been accomplished. Rama ordered Sita to be brought to him at once. Rama knew that Sita would not be accepted by his people, for she had lived in another man's house, and they had no reason to believe that she was not stained by his touch. Rama greeted her coldly, and told her that he had no choice but to renounce her, as he must renounce everything that had been in contact with the greatest of evils. Sita begged and pleaded, insisting upon her dedication to her glorious husband, and her continual and undying devotion. "O king," wept Sita, throwing herself at Rama's feet, "why did you not renounce me when Hanuman came? I could have given up my life at that time, and you need not have labored to find me, nor laid a burden on your friend. You are angry. Like a common man, you are seeing nothing in me but womanhood. I am the daughter of Janaka, and I am also daughter of the earth. I was born of earth, and you do not know my true self." She turned then to Lakshman, and she said bravely, "Build me a funeral pyre, for there is my only refuge. I will not live with an undeserved brand." And the fire was prepared. The gods threw themselves upon the mercy of Rama, praying that he should relent. And an elderly Brahma came forward and spoke words that fell on the ears of the gods and all around them like jewels. "Sita is Lakshmi, and you are Vishnu and Krishna. No stain has touched Sita, and although she was tempted in every way, she did not even consider Ravana in her innermost heart. She is spotless." The fire roared up in approval and added, "Take her back." And so Sita was returned to Rama's side, where he pledged his undying love for her. He explained then that this test had been for her own safety, that their followers would now respect her once again, for she had been proved pure. Together, they set out for Ayodhya and home. It had been 14 long years since Rama had left Ayodhya, but the memory of him and his goodness had remained etched in the hearts of every citizen. When they arrived through the gates of the city, they were greeted with uproarious cheers, and celebrations like none other were begun across the land. Bharata bowed to Sita and threw himself at Rama's feet. The kingdom was restored to Rama, and Bharata cried, "Let the world behold you today installed, like the radiant sun at midday. No one but you can bear the heavy burden of our empire. Sleep and rise to the sound of music and the tinkle of women's anklets. May you rule the people as long as the sun endures, and as far as the earth extends. So it shall be," said Rama. Rama reigned happily in Ayodhya for 10,000 years, and then the day came when Sita conceived a child. Delighted by her news, he begged her to allow him to honor her with any wish, and she expressed a wish to visit the hermitages by the Ganges. Her wish was instantly granted, and preparations were made for her travel. Lakshman was to accompany her, but before he left, he took counsel with his brother, the great Rama. "I am concerned," said Rama, "that we know the feelings of our ministers and our people. We must call a conference to ensure that all is well in the kingdom." And so a conference was duly called, and all of the counselors and friends of Rama pledged their love for him and their devotion. There was, however, one unhappiness which stained the otherwise perfect fabric of his rule. The people murmur that you have taken back Sita, although she was touched by Ravana and dwelt for many years in Lanka. For all that they say, you still acknowledge her. That is the talk. Rama's finest officer uttered these words, and as he heard them, Rama's heart was chilled through and through. He sent for Lakshman and pronounced Sita's sorry fate. "I am crushed by these slanders," said Rama, "for Sita was pronounced unstained by gods and fire and wind. But the censure of the people has pierced, and this ill fame can only bring me great disgrace. Take Sita tomorrow and leave her there, brother, and remove yourself now before I can change my mind." And so Sita and Lakshman traveled to the Ganges, armed with gifts for the hermits. When they arrived, Lakshman explained Rama's wish. Sita fell into a deep faint from which it took many minutes to recover. When she did, she spoke of her desolation and her fear at being able to survive in the forest. She could not live there, she feared, and yet she would do so because her master had decreed it. She was faithful. She was unstained. She was prepared to prove it. The world about Rama was changing, and he was advised by the gods and by his counselors that the age of Kali had begun. He continued to undertake acts of great kindness and goodness, and his fine name sat comfortably on the tongues of subjects across the kingdom. But Rama was lonely. He longed for his great love Sita, and he longed for the day when she would be declared cleansed of all unrighteousness. And that day came at last, when Rama prepared a horse sacrifice and invited the hermit Valmiki to the ceremony. He was accompanied by two young boys, Kusha and Lava, and Rama was overjoyed to discover that these were the sons born of Sita, and that she was well and still living with the hermit Valmiki. His two sons were born in his likeness, with voices as pure as a bird's. They were humble and kind, and when he offered them money for their performance to the people of the kingdom, they refused, saying that they had no need of money in the forest. Sita was sent for, and Valmiki returned to his hermitage to fetch her. Sita followed Valmiki into a waiting assembly, where the hermit made a pronouncement. "O Rama, Sita is pure, and she did follow the path of righteousness, but you renounced her because of the censure of your people. Do you now permit her to give testimony of her purity? These twin children are your sons, Rama. And I swear before you that if any sin can be found in Sita, I will forego the fruit of all austerities I have practiced for many thousand years." And so Sita said quietly, "I have never loved nor thought of anyone but Rama, even in my innermost heart. This is true. May the goddess of the earth be my protection. I pray now for Vasundhara to receive me." And the earth then thrust under the lovely Sita a throne so beautiful that each in the assembly gasped with pleasure. But the earth curled that throne around Sita and drew her back again into itself, home once again and part of the beginning and end of all things. Rama screamed with despair and fought against the anger that threatened to engulf him. Rama carried on ruling then, for some time, but his heart was no longer in his country. Lakshman traveled to a hermitage and was eventually returned to Indra as part of Vishnu. Bharata no longer wished the kingdom, although Rama begged him to take it back, and eventually it was decreed that Kusha and Lava should rule the kingdom as two cities. But Ayodhya, as it once was no longer a kingdom to be ruled, for when Rama left he was followed by all of his people. Rama joined together with his brothers then, and with the blessing and prayers of the gods and the entire population of his kingdom, he returned to heaven as Vishnu, in his own form, with his brothers. All of the gods knelt down before him, and they rejoiced. And Brahma appointed places in the heavens for all who had come after Rama, and the animals were given their godly form. Each reached his heavenly state, and in heaven, all was once again at peace. On earth it was decreed that the Ramayana should be told far and wide, and to this day it is.